Hello and good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to give it another few seconds because there are more people coming in, and then we shall begin. Okay. So this evening, as Yom HaShoah comes to an end, we chose not to focus so much on the liberation of Auschwitz, even though it has been 80 years. Our focus this evening is on rescue. And rescue comes in many different forms. And this evening, we're going to focus only on a few of them. But to start us off this evening, Cantor Karen Weber has written a poem specifically for this evening, Snapshots of a Rescuer. Karen, whenever you are ready.
I'm male, and I am female, a teenager, a university student, and a grandfather. My name is Irina, Raoul, Carrie, and Oscar, but I have other aliases as well. I will slip you past the patrol and cross you from one border to another. I am a decoy, a double agent, a smuggler, a spy. Remove the yellow star from your coat, mind the threads, and follow me to the train station. I am wealthy and I am poor, but I know that I am doing the right thing. I will bring you to a barn, prop the ladder to the attic, deliver the baby, but say she died in childbirth before handing her off to those who will keep her safe. Native Jews, alien Jews, still Jews, no difference. My name? You will never know my name. I will go to another city, dress like a police officer, and craft false papers. I will hand you shoes that will pinch and a pilled sweater 2 sizes too big, and you will thank me. I will call you by your new name after I dye your hair. I am part of a network, a web, and I work alone. In Denmark, I am a fisherman who ferries you across the water to Sweden in my sunshine boat. And when I save your one precious life, I will know I have saved the life of an entire world.
I'm not sure how I'm going to follow this, Karen. Thank you. That was absolutely amazing. So, our first stop of the evening is going to be in Denmark. Denmark is a very unique situation. The rescue of the Jews of Denmark is unique because it was not a single righteous or a single movement. It was a country. It was a people. In October of 1943, after Denmark had been occupied already for quite a few years by the Germans, we find that the very unstable relationship between the Danish government and the Nazis has come to a bit of a brawl, because now the Nazis are insisting that the Jews of Denmark should be deported out of the country. 7,800 Jews overnight were taken by little boats like the one that we're seeing here in front of us, by fishermen boats over to the Swedish borders. See, they were neutral, so it was safe to move the Jews there. 7,800 Jews and an additional 700 non-Jews who were related to those Danish Jews. All done quietly by people from all walks of society. These weren't just the fishermen. These were poets and artists and businessmen and bankers and people of the clergy. Everybody chipped in, everybody helped. The Danish resistance movement did whatever it could to also protect the 482 Jews who were left behind, either too ill or too old to actually take those boat rides. Unfortunately, most of those 482 were captured by the Nazis and sent to Theresienstadt. After the war, all 7,800 Jews returned to Denmark, their homes still waiting for them. Their lives were still there. This is also one of the very few cases in which the Righteous Award was given to the people of Denmark and to the Danish resistance. There were a few individuals who also received individual righteous recognition for taking the extra mile, doing more than everybody else. And the next place we're going to talk about is unique as well, not like Denmark, unique in a completely different way, and that is Albania. See, Albania is a very small country in the Balkans. And during World War II, there were about 800,000 people living in Albania, out of which 200 were Jews. Only 200. When the war broke out, Jews who were escaping Europe found refuge in Albania. And in the early 30s, up until 1939, there's an estimate of about 600 Jewish refugees who left Germany, who left Austria, and then also Yugoslavia and Greece, and again, found refuge in Albania. In 1943, when Albania is also conquered by the Nazis, the Albanian government refused profusely to take any law and give any list of Jews living in Albania, whether there were the original 200 citizens or whether they were refugees. This difference that we find stems from a very important code of ethics that the Albanian people live by, and that is the Besa. It's a code of honor. And within this code, the Albanian people found that they save people. It doesn't matter if they're Jews or non-Jews. Actually, in one of the researches I read a while ago, there was this little passage that said that people actually fought amongst themselves. Who could hide another Jewish family? Who could give more help? And to hear more about the help in Albania and the extraordinary stories that come out of there, Jamie Newman will be telling the story of her grandmother, Joanne. Jamie, I'm going to spotlight you, and whenever you are ready, please begin.
I'm going to tell you about how life changed as a young Jewish girl growing up in Hamburg, Germany in the 1930s. Juden sind ihr unerwünscht. Jews not allowed. At all of my favorite places, there are now signs that say Jews not allowed. At the park, at the movie theater, at the beach. They are even making me add Sarah as my middle name so that everyone will know for sure that I am Jewish. On my walk to school today, I'm passing the Borenplatz Synagogue, the same synagogue that I pass every day. But today, I am stopped in my steps because there are hordes of people throwing rocks at the beautiful stained glass windows. They're destroying it. They're burning it down. They're throwing the Jewish holy books into the streets. It's November 10th, 1938, Kristallnacht. I'm only 10 years old. I quickly continue my walk to school. I get to school, and my teachers tell us that our parents will be coming to pick us up. My parents now know that there is no future for Jews in Germany anymore. My father, he served for Germany in World War I. Hitler gave him the Iron Cross Award, so he thought that he'd be safe from the anti-Jewish measures. But he now knows that that doesn't matter anymore. I can only pack a small bag with the essentials. I have to say goodbye to my toys, goodbye to my school and my home, goodbye to my friends, and goodbye to my family staying in Germany. I don't know when I'll see my own mama again, my grandmother. But me and my parents, we're going to Albania. King Zog of Albania said that any Jew who want to find refuge there could, and they'd be protected because of Bessa, the promise to protect your guests better than yourselves. So my parents and I, we pack up our bags for the boat ride to Albania. I don't know how long I'll be there. I hope I can go to school when I get there, and I hope I can make friends when I get there. Was I disobedient? What did I do to deserve this? Will my parents come home? When will they come home? I'm lying wide awake in the middle of the night, next to the empty bed where my parents are usually sleeping. I'm at the Pilku house. The Pilkus, they're our new friends. Mr. Pilku, he's a Muslim Albanian, but Mrs. Pilku, she's a German, but she still likes us even though we're Jewish, and they decide to protect us because of Bessa, the promise. So while I'm there at the Pilku house, my parents, they got arrested earlier today. They got arrested by a local Albanian officer who said that their permit was not valid for the area they were walking in. But that can't be true. Mr. Pilku said he handled that permit issue already. But that officer was just anti-Semitic and arrested them. And while I wait for them, they're in solitary confinement with unedible food and rats around them. My parents, they're home. It's been 4 days that I've been waiting for them. And Mr. Pilku, he worked with the local police office to get them released. I'm so happy they're home, and I'm scared to be without them again. It's so lonely in a new place. Now that Germany occupies Albania, the Nazis spend a lot of time at the Pilku house because they think that Mrs. Pilku is a friend to them. But my father, he doesn't think it's so safe for my dad. Mr. Pilku, he doesn't think it's so safe for my father to be here anymore. So he sends him to a nearby farming village to hide from the Nazis because they won't search for Jews there. And they introduce me and my mom, who are staying there, staying with the Pilkus, as their cousins from Germany who are helping with the housework. We hope that this works. We hope that they don't find out that we're Jewish. Today, at the Pilku house, some Nazis are over for a tea party, and one of them looks up from his cup of tea and says, "If I were to see a Jew or a communist, I would kill them on the spot." I don't know how my mom does it, but she stays calm. She sips her tea as to not show her nervousness that she is one of those Jews. Are you Mr. and Mrs. Pilku's cousins from Germany? Some Nazis had heard about us living in a house, and they came up to my mom, who's outside the house cleaning, and asked if they were the Pilkus or if we were the Pilkus cousins. So my mom, she invited them in for some coffee, and my father, he had to immediately go into hiding. He actually had to hide in a room on top of a suitcase of Jewish religious items. The Nazis can't find him, or they will for sure know we're Jewish. He has to stay silent as to not make a noise. But the Nazis, after they come over for coffee, they decide to turn our house into their headquarters for the day, so they can search nearby houses for partisans. So they're at our house all day. My dad's in hiding all day. And at the end of the day, they look at me with my long pigtail braids and they think that I look like a model German girl. So as a special treat, they take me on a walk to the beach. When we get there, one of the officers pulls a hand grenade out of his suit and he throws it into the water. It explodes. It quickly kills a ton of fish. Is he trying to impress me? All I can think about is if he would do that to me if he knew that I was a Jew. We don't know what to do. The Germans, they're requiring all foreigners to register with the Gestapo. But we have big J's on our passports to show that we're Jewish. So should we go or should we go into hiding? Okay, we went, but we now know it's a matter of time before we're deported. We're driving through the mountains. The Pilkus, they saved us again. So actually, Mr. Pilku's cousin is a liaison between Albania and Germany. So when he finds out that the Germans are coming to deport us, he arranges for a farmer to pick us up for the night and drive us through the mountains. So we weren't home when the Nazis came to deport us. Well, it worked, and we're saved. Tricasso, Porto, Italy is so beautiful. It's a town on the sea line of Italy. It's a fishing town where all the wealthy Italians go to vacation. But for my family and for all the other Jewish refugees, it's a displaced persons camp on the stop to our final destination. Albania got their country back from the Germans, so we were able to get out and go to the displaced persons camp. For us, it's a stop to the United States. I'm making so many friends here, but all these friends I'm making, they're survivors of concentration camps and ghettos. I didn't know about any of these things when I was in Albania. It wasn't on the radio. I quickly learned that I'm the only young person here to have not lost a parent or a sibling in the war. And that's when I first realized how lucky I am to have been in Albania during the war. Every day, the mail comes to the DP camp and a survivor list comes And all of my friends, they run to the mail and they run to the survivor list, looking and hoping to be reunited with friends and family who also survived. But every day, hopes would go down as people would not be reunited with their family members. My mom and I run to the top deck of our Liberty boat. We see skyscrapers and lights. It's incredible. We've never seen anything like this before. Our Liberty boat is pulling up to New York City. It's September 1946. Are those our friends and family? And there's Omama. We're back in the port. My father, his Liberty boat is pulling up. We've been waiting 8 months for him. He couldn't get a visa with us because of the quotas, but now he's here. And we're ready to be reunited as a family in New York City. Our Talmud says that he who saves a life, it is as if he saved an entire world. Hitler tried to kill me, and I narrowly missed being caught by the Nazis many times. But now I have 4 kids, 14 grandkids, and 33 great-grandkids. This is all due to Bessa, the Promise, and the righteous in Albania who saved us.
Thank you so much, Jamie. You're more than welcome to put your appreciations into the chats for Jamie, and she will be able to see them all. Okay, so let us return. Another unique little place, very little place, is a small village in southern France, small place called La Chambon-sur-Lion. Pastor André Tocquemet and his wife both found that when France was occupied and their little village came under the Vichy rule, that there's probably going to be a need for help. What kind of help, it wasn't completely known right at the beginning, but within a few months, it became clear. It was to help refugees, mainly Jews. Tocquemet encouraged his whole congregation to help, to hide, to give shelter, to give food. Refugees were passing through this tiny village on their way, trying to escape through different borders. In 1942, when the deportations began, first internally into transit camps within France, Tocquemet realizes that it's not enough just to give food and maybe shelter for a day or two. Every single person in his congregation needs to help. And despite all the danger, and there was a lot of danger, despite the danger, everybody in that congregation, in this tiny little village, did whatever they could. Used attics, cellars, false walls, barns, and the church itself, of course. Any public institution, schools, small orphanage, every single place they could house the Jewish refugees that were pouring into this tiny little village. The pastor, his wife Magda, and their congregation did whatever they could. See, they were close enough to the Swiss border for this tiny village to be a place where people stopped for a week, a month, maybe a year, doing whatever they can, trying to escape France. In August of 42, the Gestapo marches in to this tiny village. It seems like there is suspicious activity here. And the Gestapo is trying to find out if the pastor or anybody else are doing things they're not supposed to, like helping the Jews. And the pastor says, I don't really know what you're looking for. You see, I don't know what a Jew is. I only know what a human being is. And here there are only human beings. The tension was felt in the air. But on that first day, when the Gestapo came, there were no arrests. A couple of days later, the pastor and a few more men from the congregation were arrested, interrogated, tortured. They didn't say anything. They don't know of Jews. They haven't seen any. No, they're not hiding anybody. They were released and the Gestapo left. There was then another attempt the following year to come and purge the village from all the Jews. But again, nothing. They cannot find any Jews there. In January 1971, Pastor Andrei Trocme was recognized by Yad Vashem as a righteous, but his whole congregation and the village was recognized as a righteous village. His wife Magda also received her righteousness, and 32 members of the congregation received individual righteousness. And our next stop is going to be in the Netherlands. So the Netherlands is an interesting little story. The photo that we're seeing in front of us is of the Great Strike of February 1941 in Amsterdam. The strike was against Nazi policies in general. It wasn't specifically against the Jewish and the anti-Jewish policies. And for quite a few days, the Dutch people were, I won't say rioting, but demonstrating quite forcefully all over Amsterdam. That demonstration did not end well for the Jews, because during this demonstration, one of the Nazi policemen, and this would be a local Dutch policeman who joined the Nazi party, was killed. The retaliation was collecting 400 Jewish men randomly on the street, no lists, and sent them all to Metterhausen. That stopped the demonstrations for a while. But the real help that the Jewish community in the Netherlands needed came the following year, in 1942, in July of 1942, when the deportations out of the Netherlands began. Usually, the Dutch seem to be very obedient to the laws. But when the deportations began, something happened. And the first thing that happened was a group of students from Utrecht decided they want to go and save children. And they do. They manage to take about 4 different groups of children that were all supposed to be deported over the next few days from Amsterdam. And they took those children to Utrecht and placed them with different families who were willing to help. The students received a lot of support, and that group of students grew and grew. And one of their biggest supporters was, again, a priest by the name of De Jong. The priest not only encouraged the students to do whatever they could to help save people, he also gave money and encouraged the rest of the congregation to give money and to help support as much as possible. By the end of 1943, the demonstrations began again. This time, the demonstrations were organized by students. Some of those demonstrations, we could even see them as a form of decoy, because at the same time where some students were demonstrating, other students were moving yet more children into hiding in the countryside, in different cities all over. The student unions were not the only ones that helped. There were many individuals with great risk to their own lives, did whatever they could to hide Jews, to help Jews, to help falsify papers for Jews. The Dutch underground had different branches doing different things. Some transported kids from one house to another. Some falsified papers. Some blew up train tracks. Later on today, we will talk a bit about the numbers, and we will return to the story of the Netherlands and their number of righteous. But to hear a bit more about a little boy that found help and rescue from different people, we shall turn over to Emily Hand, who will be telling us the story of Harry Davis. Going to spotlight you whenever you're ready.
I was born in the fall of 1942, several months after the Nazis had begun deporting Jews from the Netherlands. My mother and father were unable to go into hiding until 2 months after I was born, when my mother would hand me to the Dutch resistance. I would never see them again. I was first placed with a group of 4, a mother, a father, their daughter, and a young Jewish woman the family was hiding. I stayed with them until I was 6 months old, at which time we would be betrayed to the Germans. See, the Nazis arrived with a truck to take us away, but this day, a niece was visiting, and the truck only had room for 4. I was left with a niece, and she was instructed to wait there, and that they would be back for her. A neighbor, who was a member of the Dutch resistance, heard about our betrayal and came to my rescue. The Dutch resistance came and they pounded and pounded on the door, yelling that they were Nazis and to let them in. There would be trouble if she didn't. So she did. The resistance broke in, took a chair and some rope and tied up the niece, and they took me away, putting me on a train to Utrecht the next morning. That's where I would stay for 2.5 months before the entire system to hide Jewish children would be betrayed. I was yet again placed into a large vehicle, and we drove from house to house, extricating Jewish children from those hiding them. Yet again, the resistance heard about this, broke into the vehicle while Nazis were in another home, and wheeled me on a bicycle to a number of different fishing villages in the north. I was very sick, thin with sores all over my body, wearing only a diaper and a wet towel. Nobody wanted me. I arrived at Dokkum at 14 months old, where I would live with the Bakker family until the war was over. After the war was over, it would be 7 months before my name came to anyone's attention. See, since I was born into hiding, nobody even knew that I existed. Once my uncle in South Africa was aware of my existence from reading in the newspaper. He came to Fisland to fight for custody. This was a several-month-long legal battle, and even once he gained custody of me, I didn't have any papers, and this made obtaining a passport extremely difficult. It wasn't until May of 1947 that I was able to move to South Africa, where I would live for the next several decades. An interesting thing about surviving the Holocaust is that it makes you more aware of the seeds of hatred, even before they sprout. Surviving the Holocaust, I became aware of the apartheid in South Africa several years before many of my peers, and I spent much of my time and energy protesting the system. I've lived a good life in America. I've had a full career, wonderful friends, and I've spent my retirement speaking about my experiences. I was luckier than most, but it shouldn't have taken luck to survive. We must stand up, recognize the seeds of hatred before they take root, and be good to our fellow man. People stood up for me. Will you stand up?
Thank you, Emily. That was beautifully told and so important. Maybe today more than other days. And again, you may appreciate Emily in the chat. She will be able to read your lovely comments. And we're going to move a bit further into Europe, and we are moving to Hungary. Swiss Vice Consul Karl Lutz arrived in Budapest in 1942 with his wife after spending 6 years as the vice consul in Mandatory Palestine in Jaffa. He had served diplomatic services in all sorts of places, but in Jaffa, he got to know the Jews. When he arrived in Budapest, the war was already well on its way, but not so much in Hungary. In 1944, when the Nazis invade Hungary, Karl, his wife, and his whole diplomatic corps embark on one of the largest diplomatic rescue projects. He starts off with developing letters of protection. They're like a form of a visa letter. And he had about 7,800 of these letters, certificates. And he received those certificates. They were real certificates from Great Britain. They were passage into Great Britain and Mandatory Palestine. All those certificates were numbered. But very quickly he begins to understand that those 7,000 certificates are a drop in the sea. So he embarks on a new endeavor, and that is acquiring 76 buildings all over Budapest, making them part of the embassy. That's international territory. It is no longer Hungary. And he places Jews in those buildings. And yet again, that wasn't enough. And the next stage was taking over a glass factory, the glass house. In the glass house, the headquarters of the Jewish resistance sat. Karl Lutz worked with them. They, of course, were not called the Jewish resistance or the Chalutz, the Zionistic youth movement. They were now called the Office of Immigration. And in that office, more and more of these certificates were duplicated and copied and handed out. In total, it is estimated that over 20,000 Jews received these certificates. Karl Lutz himself helped save tens of thousands between the houses, between the glass house, between the real certificates. When the war was over and Lutz and his wife returned, the Swiss don't see his actions as very admirable. He's stripped of his diplomatic rank. He's basically shunned for quite a long time, until the Jews that were saved through the glass house, through the certificates, through the protected houses, started the process of requesting his recognition as a righteous. Only then was he recognized not just by Yad Vashem, but also back home in his own community. And today, the Swiss, of course, are very proud of Karl Lutz. But Lutz wasn't the only one who saved. And to tell us a bit more, Dr. Deborah Frick will tell us the story of Dr. Vera Goodkin. Deborah, whenever you're ready.
I never thought I'd see my parents again. Not after I left my mother in the concentration camp. We'd been separated from my father months before, the night we all got arrested in Budapest. They took the men one direction, the women and children the other, and we thought we'd never see him again. They took my mother and I, along with the rest of the women and children, to a prison camp not far outside Budapest called Kistarsa. We were there for months, starving, barely hanging on, until one day, three men from the Swedish Red Cross showed up at the camp and convinced the commandant that according to the Geneva Conventions, he needed to release all the children under 14 into their custody. And so I was whisked away from my mother, and I thought I'd never see her again. I mean, I was only 13, but we all knew what happened to the people in the concentration camps. As we drove away from Kistarsa, one of the men from the Red Cross said to us, "This isn't really a Red Cross operation. We're doing this for a man named Raoul Wallenberg. He's trying to save as many people as he can, especially children." That was the first time I'd heard his name, Wallenberg. They took us to a children's home run by the Swedes, but I was only there for a couple of weeks before I got scarlet fever and ended up in the hospital. I was in the hospital for 6 weeks in quarantine, but I was the lucky one, because one day while I was in quarantine, a group of men from the Arrow Cross, that's the Hungarian fascists, they got drunk and they broke into the children's home and kidnapped and murdered all the children in the home. All of them. All except me, because I wasn't there. They took me to another Swedish-run children's home, and I've been living there ever since until my father showed up at the Swedish embassy. My mother and father have the craziest story. My mother was on a transport that was bound for Auschwitz and got diverted to the camp that my father was at, and they found each other, and they managed to escape one night when the partisans sabotaged the gate. They made their way across the burnt out countryside until they made it back to Budapest. And they've been hiding in Budapest. But one day, my father said to my mother, "This is not going to work. We're going to get caught. I am going to go see if I can find that miraculous Swede that everyone is talking about, that Raoul Wallenberg, see if he can help us." So my father shows up at the Swedish embassy. 5 minutes later, he is standing in front of this elegant young man holding 2 passes in his hand. One for him, one for my mother. Schutz passes, protective safe passes that give them the protection of the Swedish embassy. And my father looks up at Mr. Wallenberg, and Mr. Wallenberg smiles at him and says, "Do you know, we still have your little girl." And so we were reunited, and we're living in this safe house, this apartment building in Budapest that flies a Swedish flag and is under the protection of the Swedish government. And for the first time in a very long time, I think we might be okay. Because someone considered us worthy of being saved. Mine was not the only family that was saved by Raoul Wallenberg and his colleagues at the Swedish embassy. In the last few months of the war, in Nazi-occupied Budapest, more than 30 buildings flew Swedish flags and were under the protection of the Swedish embassy. Tens of thousands of Jewish lives were saved. And some of the stories are just crazy. Apparently, when Wallenberg heard that they were taking Jews out to the Danube and shooting them, he said to his people, "Who knows how to swim?" They went down to the banks of the Danube in the dark of night, and every time they heard a splash, he sent a swimmer in to try to rescue the people and bring them to a pair of ambulances he had brought that could take them to the hospital that he had built. He saved 50 or 60 people this way. My friend told me a story about when she was on a death march with her mother and her aunt. They were locked into a brick factory at night with 500 other people. They wake up in the morning to find this young man in this long black leather coat bustling among them, saying, don't worry, I'll come back for you." They thought they were imagining things, that they were dreaming. But when the gates were unlocked, they found trucks, not German trucks, Swedish trucks. And this same young man, Wallenberg, standing there with a sheaf of papers saying, don't you remember? I gave you this pass. You forgot it, but I have a copy for you. Get on the truck, It's going to be okay. And my friend says that 500 people as one looked up at the sky and said, Shema Yisrael. Not just because they were saved, but because someone had found them worthy of being saved. You see, this is what they took from us. Not just our lives, but our sense of self-worth. And this is what Wallenberg and his colleagues gave us back. Not only our lives, but our sense of ourselves, our sense of our own worth. They gave us back our humanity.
Thank you so much, Deborah. That was fantastic. Please continue writing in the chats, and Deborah will be able to read all your good words. So this is Raoul Wallenberg, and this is one of the official embassy photos. Most of the survivors who met Wallenberg described him as tall, handsome, with a long black leather coat. So Wallenberg arrives in Budapest, and in March of 1944, when the Nazis invade, the Swedish embassy decides to appoint Wallenberg as the secretary to the Swedish embassy, and he basically asks for free rein to do whatever he can to save people. He starts off with one list of 650 protective passports. These were passports of people who had relatives and relations in Sweden. And he realizes within 2 days that 650 protective passports won't be enough. He meets with Karl Lutz. He learns about the operation that they are doing. And he sees the value in having these protected houses. By July of 1944, Wallenberg had already purchased 32 houses, 2 hospitals, and a soup kitchen. Dozens of people started working for him within the Swiss embassy, creating these certificates, the protective papers, the Schutzpasses. But in October of 1944, things started turning for the worse in Budapest. It is not enough that we have the Nazis. There is now a fascist party by the name of Arrow Cross that raises to power, and they don't care about papers and passes and Schutzpasses. And yet, Wallenberg finds his way to continue to protect the Jews around him. And he doesn't always do this in the most legal ways, so to speak. Sometimes bribery, sometimes by just, as we heard in the story, showing up, saying, yes, yes, you forgot your papers. Here are the papers, even if there weren't any. Thousands of people were protected by Wallenberg. On the 17th of January, 1945, Wallenberg was only 32. The Soviets had already entered and occupied Budapest. And they take away Wallenberg for an interrogation. An interrogation that has lasted till today because he has never been seen again. On the 26th of November, 1963, Yad Vashem recognizes Wallenberg as a righteous, but the Israeli government recognizes Wallenberg as a citizen in Israel. The United States Congress, the same year, also recognizes Wallenberg as a citizen of the United States. And yet, we don't know where Wallenberg ended his life, whether it was in a jail cell or somewhere else. So I've said a lot this evening, the righteous among the nations and the righteous. In 1962, in Israel, on the Mountains of Remembrance, where Yad Vashem is located, the Avenue of the Righteous was inaugurated by then the Foreign Minister Golda Meir and many other dignitaries. The big project of the recognition of righteous people all over Europe began before the Avenue. But the point of the Avenue of the Righteous on this mountain was to plant trees. Because to give a certificate to somebody saying, yes, we recognize you, that you were righteous, you saved Jews at high risk to yourself with no financial gain, wasn't really enough. The decision was to plant one tree for every righteous, because trees represent life. The poem we heard at the beginning of the evening and the photo of the monument was the monument of the anonymous righteous, because there were people who saved and did not want to be recognized, whether it was for political reasons, whether it was for their own other reasons. But the recognition of righteous continues constantly. There is a committee in Yad Vashem made up of historians, rabbis, and Supreme Court judges that review every single case and every single documentation to make sure that the person that is going to be recognized is in fact a righteous, again, at great risk to themselves and with no financial gain or any other kind of gain apart from saving somebody. So unfortunately, Yad Vashem is a bit slow with producing their numbers. So the last count that I could access was from January 2023, with a total of 28,486 righteous people all over the world. And you will see that there is a breakdown into countries. including surprising places like Japan and El Salvador and Egypt. But there is one big number that I did say I would return to, and that is the one of the Netherlands. In Holland, we have a very unique situation where it is not just individuals who were saved by different righteous people that the request is brought in front of the committee, but it is the Dutch government that actually approaches and asks recognition on behalf of different people. To date, 6,066 righteous were recognized in the Netherlands as individual people. In total, there were 28,000 Jews in hiding in the Netherlands, out of which 5,000 Jews were then given up to the Nazis. So it doesn't matter. As long as they saved one person, as the Talmud says, they've saved the whole world. All the photos in this presentation were taken from the Yad Vashem archive, Beta Dut Nir Galim, and the Imperial Museum in London. I shall open the floor to your questions, comments, thoughts, and so on. Thank you. Please feel free to just open your mic and ask away or comment away. Okay, no questions. I can keep talking. I can talk forever. We can talk about the politics of the righteousness and how we had to change the name between righteous Gentiles to righteous among the nations. Or I can tell you about Oskar Schindler, who everybody thought was a righteous, but actually he wasn't.
So tell us, why did they change the name?
From righteous
Gentiles.
So Gentiles is no longer a word that we use. It's a bit insulting, I would say. But the real reason is that it is not just among the Gentiles. It is among the nations, because there's also the understanding that there were Jewish-led organizations that saved Jews. So even though they will not receive a certificate that says you're a righteous, the title has become more universal. And that is why it is among the nations.
So can you be a Jewish righteous?
No, but there is a different recognition of Jews rescuing Jews. This is a new initiative. It's only started a few years ago. They get a form of a certificate, but it's a bit different. And it doesn't say on it that they're righteous among the nations. They say that it says on it for saving within your own communities and so on. But it was an initiative that was pushed by survivors and not so much by the committees.
Who initiated the idea of the righteous in the first place?
This started off at about the same time as the Yad Vashem law. So back in the early 50s in the state of Israel, one of the first 3 laws that were created through the Israeli Knesset was the Yad Vashem law, which is documenting and preserving the history of the Holocaust. And part of that was also recognizing the righteous. How to do it took a while. And only in the late 50s was there an understanding that you actually need to through all the documentation and you need to verify that the person is the person and that they did what they did. And also that the survivors not in any way kind of pushed to ask for this recognition. So even though the initiative for this started at the early 50s, it actually only came to flourish in 1960, before the Eichmann trial, I should say. First Dina, then Tanya, in the order in which you raised your virtual hand.
Okay. I had 2 very, very dear survivor friends who were Schindler Juden. So tell me why Oskar Schindler was not a righteous.
Okay. So he is now. He has been a righteous since 1993. But in the 60s, when Schindler was still alive, his survivors, or some of them, came and requested his recognition. The committee reviewed his case and they said, "We're very sorry. He made a fortune in the enamel factory in Krakow. There is no way that he can be a righteous. He gained off the Jews. Yes, he saved them. Yes, he protected them, but he made a fortune. He lost the fortune after the war, but that was his own doing." So the
He
way
wasn't
that
a very good businessman.
no, he most definitely wasn't. So the way the committee saw it was they encouraged the survivors to submit Magda, his wife. And the reaction of the survivors were sneaking onto the Mountain of Remembrance and planting a tree. They're like, "That's the tree." And they put a sign on it and they didn't care. And Yad Vashem left the tree because there is a law in this country about taking down trees. So the tree was left. And Yad Vashem recognized Schindler's wife as a righteous. 1993 comes out, Schindler's List, Spielberg, big splash, the whole world knows about it. The committee goes, "Oops, everyone's gonna ask us if Oscar Schindler is a righteous. And if he's not, then how is he not?" So, okay, he's now a righteous. And on the same tree that the survivors planted, they changed the plaque to one of the official plaques and they have the certificate and so on. But rumor has it that if the film wouldn't have been such a big success, he probably wouldn't have been recognized. I hope that answered the question. Tanya,
Thank you.
pleasure.
So I found out about a month ago that my cousin's wife's family in Poland were hiding Jews, and they are recognized by Yad Vashem. And they had a book that I guess has their story in it, but I know that the testimony would be in Polish. And I'm guessing that a lot of the testimony that you would be getting at Yad Vashem is in just all kinds of languages. Is it being translated into English? Do you have to request a particular one to be translated into English, or how does that work?
So yes, in Yad Vashem, there are many researchers from nearly every country in Europe. So therefore, there is no need to really translate. Files that are submitted get a summary in Hebrew to the committee because the committee all speaks Hebrew. If you want something specific translated, you can request it. The Righteous Department are not fast in answering emails, but you can always tell me and I'll try and get somebody to do something to help.
Fair
If you
enough.
would-
Thanks.
Yes, please. Yeah.
You have to unmute. You could maybe write it in the chat and we take the question from the chat. Because you're still on mute.
Oh, still on mute.
While they're figuring that out, Lynn, I had a question that came up in my mind when you were talking about Schindler. Are there other people like Schindler who have not been recognized because they made money off it, who maybe ought to be?
So there's only, yes, I'm sure there are. Not every file is accepted. I do know of one additional case where at the end it was accepted, but I can't remember his first name. His surname was Socha from Poland. He helped hide Jews in the sewers, but he also took their money. So in his defense, he said he took the money to buy them food because he didn't have enough ration stamps. So he could only buy in the black market. But that was a very, very big debate. And at some point, it was decided yes to accept it because there were enough of the survivors who said that he only took enough money to feed them. So that, but it did go back and forth for a very long time. But I do know that there were people that were not accepted as righteous, mainly because of financial gain. So yeah, I don't know specifics though. They don't really publish that. How are we getting along with the unmuting?
Doesn't seem to be working.
It should be on one of the battery.
Diane, you could put your question,
I
Dina,
believe.
Diane,
Here.
you could put a question into the,
She has. Is there an explanation why there are differences in responses from different countries? You mean in terms of like Denmark and Albania versus Poland and Lithuania? So Lynn, what do you think? In the levels of
Level of
righteousness.
righteousness. Okay, so the highest number of righteousness are in Poland. On the other hand, Poland had 3 million Jews. So it's easier to reach a higher number. Yes, there's many different factors that come into whether or not people were willing to risk their lives for the Jews or not. In some places where anti-Semitism always existed well before the Nazis entered, there might be a bit less of a inclination to help and to support. So not so much a factor of leadership in response to your question, because in some countries, and I'll take again Poland as an example, the Polish government goes to exile into London, and they basically try to help the Polish resistance to also help the Jewish resistance. How much of that is actually translated to stuff happening on the ground? Not always, and not so much. There are a lot of different factors. In most of the Baltic countries, we see there isn't a lot of rescuers. There are. In every country, we find there were righteous people and righteous organizations. I didn't go into a lot of the different help organizations, like the Żegota, like the underground in Romania, like the underground in France. There's also an underground. It's not just that village, of course. I did cherry pick for today's talk to show, to highlight a few of these very extraordinary cases, like Albania. Albania starts off at the beginning of the war with 200 Jews and ends with 2,000 Jews. That's a very unique situation, right? Or Denmark, which is a unique situation. But there were righteous people everywhere. Karen, you wanted to
I did. I mean, in the poem too, you know, I work alone, but I also work in an organization, the rescuer said. You know, I am myself a person who could be from any profession, of any age. And I think this idea that every country, you know, I don't know that there is a particular country at a particular stand on something. I think it's also really up to the people within it and how they organize. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And also there were other forms of help, right? Help isn't just taking somebody into hiding. Help is bringing a hot meal to a ghetto that's an open ghetto that the non-Jews could enter. Help is also, you know, somebody who sits in a back office and falsifies a paper. Help is also, you know, sending your warm coat into the ghetto, or as there's this one story that is very close to liberation in places like the Netherlands where they're throwing bread out of the window for people who are on a death march. That's also a form of help. It's also a form of rescue. And that also is something that is at great risk to themselves. But you know, people did do all sorts of things. And of course, there were lots of different underground movements who opposed the Nazis, but didn't necessarily think too much about, you know, going to blow up train tracks into a death camp, because that wasn't their agenda. The agenda was to take away the oppressors from their own country. So that's what I said at the beginning. There are different forms of help. Unfortunately, in a 1 hour talk, I can't give everything. I wish I could. But there are different forms of help. One of those forms of help is the Kindertransport. And to hear more about that, join us in November for our November program, where we'll be hearing stories from the Kindertransport and talking about that whole operation, which was also the rescue of 10,000 children.
One last question. Can you talk to us about the role of Sweden in the Danish rescue?
Of course. So Sweden was neutral during the war. And Sweden played a lot of different moves with different countries and with different things. But their closest neighbor, Denmark, turns to Sweden and says, we need to shelter 7,800 people. Can you take them in? And the Swedes said, okay, they'll have to work. Children will have to go to school. They can't just sit around here. And they do. That's on the one hand, right? On the other hand, as they're taking in these refugees, we'll call them, they're taking them on a temporary basis, which means that the Danish people, the Danish Jews, don't really have rights in Sweden. They can stay there, they can work, the children can go to school, but they can't vote in an election if there was one. They can't really open a bank account. They can't do things that a citizen would be able to do. They're there temporarily, and everybody knows it, like both parties know it. But Sweden does have a very big part in the rescue in Hungary. So it seems that even though they tried to stay neutral, they weren't completely neutral, because they did do what they could to help, and they did spend a lot of money. Yes, Shanghai and China, again, come to the November program. You will hear all about although it's not part of the Kindertransport, it happens at exactly the same time, and our program will touch upon both of those.
Maybe one day we should have a program about Asia,
Yeah.
about the folks who go through Asia. I don't know how many stories we have like that, but that would be an interesting program.
Yep, there's a good few hundred of them.
Right.
So a few hundred rescued. So yes, absolutely. All
Then
right.
you
how
want to
is
pass this
time?
out
Oh,
and tell us about upcoming programs?
yes, let me bring back our slides. So I didn't even realize time flies when you have fun talking about the righteousness. So if you haven't had enough of Holocaust things, I really encourage you to come this Sunday to our joint program together with the YIVO Institute of Jewish Research. It will take place on Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 7 p.m. Central. This program is very unique. Deborah will be telling the story of Yitzhak Rudoshevsky, the boy from Vilna, and YIVO will show their new exhibition, their new online exhibition, which is all based on the Rudoshevsky diary. And I'll be there for the kicks of it. So please do join us. You can scan the barcode here, or we will be dropping the link into the chat in a minute. And on behalf of Teach the Shoah, our director and storyteller this evening, Dr. Deborah Fripp, our VP Violet, and Jennifer, both are not here this evening, And of course, thank you to Cantor Karen Weber, who wrote the most magnificent poem to kickstart our evening. Emily, who you also heard this evening, our historian in residence. And of course, Jamie, our storyteller. Thank you all very much. Please stay in touch with us. You can find us at teachtheshoah.org, on Facebook at Teach the Shoah, YouTube at Teach the Shoah. And if you'd like to email us, info@teachtheshoah, or any of our names, Deborah, Lynn, or Emily. Thank you all. You have been magnificent.
Thank you, Lynn. As always, an amazing program.
Thank you
You're
so
a
much.
beautiful teacher.
Thank you.
This is Ted Kagan, and thank you for two marvelous workshops, the Mondays, the Light from Darkness, and today's. So thank you for all your hard work. It's been really tremendous.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much. Thank you.
All right, Lynn, do you want to close out and come back?